All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Cryptid Counterculture. I'm your host, Sloan Barton. I want to ask you something before we get into this. If you were standing outside, alone, in the dark, and you heard something growl at you, not off in the distance, not somewhere out in the woods, but close enough that you could feel it in your chest, what would you think you're dealing with? A dog? A coyote? Something you understand? Now, what if I told you the person this happened to still can't answer that question? Tonight's episode starts like a story you've heard before. Something attacks someone in a rural area. Authorities say it was probably an animal. Case closed. But when you slow it down and you really look at what happened, and more importantly, how it happened, it starts to fall apart. Because this isn't just about something violent. It's about something that doesn't line up. Something that should make sense, but doesn't quite. So let's get into it. This happened in rural Oklahoma. And I want you to really picture this. Not just out in the country. I mean truly rural. The kind of place where when the sun goes down, it gets really dark. No street lights, no traffic, just open land, tree lines, and silence. And in that kind of silence, when something makes a sound, you notice it. Alicia Maxey is outside. Everything is normal, right up until the moment it isn't. Because she hears something. It's not footsteps. It's not something moving through the brush. It's not leaves or twigs. It's a growl. A deep one. The kind that hits your body before your brain catches up. The kind that makes something inside you go quiet because it knows something's wrong. And then, impact. No warning beyond that sound. No time to react. Whatever this thing was, it closed distance instantly. It hit her hard enough to knock her straight to the ground. And it didn't stop. By the time she's found, she's unconscious, with severe injuries to the face, arms, and legs. Multiple surgeries. The kind of damage that tells you this wasn't quick. This wasn't something that lashed out and ran. This was sustained. Something stayed there. Something kept going. And when she's finally able to describe what happened, she doesn't say it was a dog. She says it was dog-like. Now right there, that's where this stops being simple. Because people know what dogs look like. They know what coyotes look like. They know what wolves look like, even in low light, even under stress. The human brain is good at recognizing familiar shapes. So when someone doesn't give you a clear answer, that matters. That tells you something didn't line up clean. Because when you go through something like that, your brain wants to make sense of it, to organize it, to put it in a box. Because if you can name something, you can understand it. And if you can understand it, you can feel like you have some control over it. And when someone can't do that, that's worth paying attention to. Let's go back to that moment again. slow it down even more. You're standing there. It's quiet. Too quiet. And then that growl. How close was it? Because for it to hit you like that, it wasn't far away. That wasn't something off in the distance. That was close, which means it was already there, watching, waiting, present. And then the impact. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Whatever this was, it committed instantly. There was no window, no chance to react. And that's not just frightening. That feels deliberate. So let me ask you something. If you were in that situation, alone, in the dark, and something growled at you from that close, what would you do? Would you freeze? Would you run? Would you try to fight? Because the truth is, most people think they know until it actually happens. And then instinct takes over. And in a situation like this, instinct might not be enough. Because whatever this was, it didn't give her time to rely on anything. It was already happening. Now, let's ground this. Animal attacks do happen. Feral dogs can be very aggressive, but those attacks usually involve multiple animals, chaos, movement, noise. Coyotes tend to avoid humans. Mountain lions are silent ambush predators. They don't growl and announce themselves. They don't give warning. So when you compare those patterns to what happened here, you start to see gaps. Not enough to rule anything out, but enough to say, this doesn't line up perfectly. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Not what we know, but what we don't know. Because when something like this happens, there are usually clear indicators, tracks, bite patterns, evidence that points in one direction. But here, we don't have that, at least not yet. And that absence matters, because when something causes this level of damage, it usually leaves behind clarity too. So the question becomes, why isn't that here? Is it just early? Or is this one of those cases where, even with the evidence, it still doesn't line up clean? Because those cases exist, and they all have one thing in common. They leave questions behind. Let's walk it all the way through. If this was an animal, what kind? A single dog? That means something confident enough to approach, announce itself, and fully commit. That's not typical. Multiple dogs? That explains the damage. But where's the chaos? Where's the multiple points of attack? A coyote? That gets even harder. A mountain lion? That explains power, but not the growl, and not the description. So every time you land on something else don't fit. And that don't mean there's no answer, but it does mean it's not a clean one. And this is where we zoom out, because this isn't just about this case. It's about a pattern, that gray area, where something is close enough to be real, but not clear enough to be certain. Almost human, almost animal, dog-like. That language shows up too often, and that tells you something. Not necessarily what something is, but that people are encountering things that don't fit neatly in the category. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying this was anything beyond an animal, but I am noticing patterns. When you look into reports of what people call Dogman, you hear similar descriptions. Something that looks like a dog, but not exactly. Deep growls, sudden explosive movement, encounters that feel targeted. Now, does that mean that's what this was? No. But when you see those overlaps, you don't ignore them. You stay grounded, but you pay attention. Now think about what happens after something like this. Because surviving something like that, it changes you. Not just physically, mentally. Your sense of safety shifts. And when you try to explain it, your brain is rebuilding reality at the same time. So when someone says dog-like, that's not just a description. That's reconstruction. That's the mind trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense in the moment. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Not that this was something unknown. Not that this was something explainable. But that we're still trying to figure out where the line actually is. Because cases like this, they sit right on it. Right between explanation and uncertainty. Most of the time, there's an answer. Most of the time, things make sense once you have all the pieces. But every now and then, you get something that doesn't quite fit. Something that stays with you. And when someone says, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just a dog, that's not something I ignore. That's something I pay attention to. If you've got thoughts on this one, or if you've ever experienced something that didn't sit right, you can reach out to me at thecryptidcounterculture@gmail.com or join the conversation in the Facebook group, Discovering Dogman and the Unexplained. And until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep looking into things that don't quite make sense.